We are now talking to Draft Countdown managing partner and analyst, Shane Hallam. What's going on, Mr. Hallam?
Hey, thanks guys for having me. Not too much. Just enjoying the football as always. It's been a grind this season. Been a lot of fun. So thanks for having me.
Are you a Steelers fan?
I was about to say I spot a problem already.
Well, I'm born, raised, and living in Pittsburgh. So we got the Steelers. I'm an Ohio State alumni. I got the Buckeye stuff. We're ready to go.
I'm not sorry. They're a good team. Great organization. It's won
a good team. They're 6-5-1. What do you mean they're a great team?
They're a great organization. They've won 7 championships.
I meant this year.
That's a great organization. Well,
no,
Ben,
it is.
Ben's like 50 years old. That's probably why. I mean, seriously.
Whoa, you can't. How old are you?
I said Ben. Big
Who's
Ben.
Ben? Oh,
Big
right.
Ben.
My bad.
Jeez. I mean, he needs to go. So why don't you tell the fans how you got your job over there doing the draft countdown and being a draft specialist? How did you become a draft specialist?
Just like anyone, it was something I started writing about the draft back in 2004. So I've covering the draft now. This is year 17 for me, covering the NFL draft and, writing around, kind of hopping around, trying to get my name out there. And I landed a job at Draft Countdown back in the mid 2000s with Scott Wright. It was one of the first NFL draft websites back in 1997. He started it. And so he's moved on to some other things. And myself and my partner, Brian Bassarge, have taken over the site. And, I have up there my 2021 rankings, a 7-round 2021 mock. I have 2022 rankings, 2022, 2023 rankings, and a 7-round 2023 mock draft. And then I have 2024 NFL draft rankings and a 3-round 2024 mock draft. So, a lot of people this past weekend we're wondering where Bryce Young is going to match up in that 2023 draft and have been coming over and checking that out. So it's been a lot of fun, and we just launched it again this August, and it's going well.
So why don't we get into the draft? Obviously, this coming draft, this kid from Michigan, Hutchinson, is just playing unbelievable football right now. A lot of people comparing him to J.J. Watt and his ability. The kid from Oregon, who everybody is the predominant number 1 pick. I can't pronounce his name.
Kayvon Thibodeaux.
Thibodeaux, yeah. Who everybody keeps saying that he's the predominant number 1 draft pick. Are you surprised that this year's draft is predominantly all these defensive linemen and cornerbacks? Or because we've seen the last couple of drafts, it's been offensive line and offensive players the last 2 years. So what are your thoughts of Hutchinson's, Thibodeaux, and the first 5 picks of this year's draft?
I think they're both really good players. And Hutchinson, I think the thing that's going to kind of tip him, even though he's already getting that number 1 buzz, really tip him into, okay, this guy can play. It's going to be the combine. 6'6", 275 pounds. He's going to work out like a guy that's 245, 250. He's that athletic. I think that is something that a lot of people just haven't known about him until that Ohio State game, and he kind of broke out and be like, whoa, this guy can play. He got hurt last season. So I think if you have a team like Detroit, Hutchinson, Michigan high school kid going to the University of Michigan, it'd be a natural fit. I still have Kayvon Thibodeaux as my number 1 player. I just think as a pass rusher, he is unbelievable, was the number 1 recruit in that class, and has that first step is unbelievable explosiveness that's really hard to stop. Against the run, he leaves a lot to be desired, but that's not why you take a guy in the top 5. And I do think it's going to be very defensive heavy. It's been since the Courtney Brown, LeVar Arrington year back in the early 2000s since we've had 2 defensive players go off the board in the first 2 picks. So this is probably going to happen this year. And, we might see Evan Neal, the offensive tackle from Alabama, go in the top 5. But I think we see Kyle Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame, up there. It's cyclical. We have these offensive drafts, and then every once in a while you get this defensive heavy. These guys have stayed in school. I think the COVID year also has had some offensive players not playing as well as they did. It really favored the defense, and that's kind of swung back to this defensive draft.
So one of the trends that's actually very interesting is the wide receivers, because before this year, there were 3 straight years where a lot of those receivers were high profile and they didn't get drafted until later. 2018, it was Calvin Ridley, who was some of his best receiver, didn't go to 26. Then 2019 with Metcalf and A.J. Brown and guys like that, and nobody went till Hollywood Brown at the Ravens at 25. And then this year, all of a sudden, they go back to it. Jamar Chase 5, Devontae Smith 10, Jalen Waddle 6. So do you think the receivers are going to become more prominent again this year with a pretty good class of receivers this year?
I think it's pretty good. We don't have that Jamar Chase kind of player, but you have a lot of outside receivers. The 2021 class was a lot of slot guys outside of Chase. You had a lot of guys in the slot, smaller, could do different things. Devonta Smith, Jalen Waddle, Terrace Marshall, those kind of players, Rashad Bateman. I think this class has, you have Treylon Burks, who's 6'5", 230 pounds, who can run a 4.4. You're going to have Jamison Williams, who from Alabama, transfer from Ohio State, that's kind of Henry Ruggs on steroids, and is going to be a 4.3 player at 6'2". So I think it's tough because I don't think we're going to have that top 10 pick maybe of a receiver, but I do think from 10 to 32, we could see as many as 5 or 6 go off the board. Teams just need more weapons. We look at the Packers. You look at some of these teams that still just haven't drafted one when they could have. They're probably going to go after it this year.
So every NFL draft, we see a team kind of make that, well, we didn't see that coming trade. Obviously, Pittsburgh did a few years ago when they traded up for Devin Bush. The Bears love to move up and just give away draft picks like, they grow on trees. So this year, do you think there's going to be that team that's kind of 20 to 32 that trades up to get their quarterback or their wide receiver or just a random player in the draft? Or do you think that this year is going to be very static with draft picks?
It's a really good question because I think this could be more of a static year because we don't have those quarterbacks. That's usually what drives the trade-ups, right? And this year has maybe a number of guys that are probably going to be first-round picks but aren't, top 10 picks. How do you balance that? Does a team, really have a guy that they like a lot and so they do want to move up? It could happen. I think it's more likely if we see a team move up, it's probably offensive line this year because there's not a ton, it's not a super deep group. But I think you do have a couple first-round picks. Evan Neal, the offensive tackle from Alabama, I mentioned before, 6'7", 360 pounds, and maybe the most dominant player to me in college football. He's just so good. So someone could move up. You need a left tackle. You need a bookend. Let's go up and get this guy because after him, I think you're talking about small school upside guys, and that's just a little bit tricky. So if it was my guess, I would guess maybe we see kind of a weird position like that. Maybe you see a team make that move that's lacking a little bit in the offense. Maybe Baltimore, I think, could be an interesting team that could move up. That's maybe is one piece away in that offensive line that's just really broken down to try to pull that offense together.
As you guys know, we are talking to Draft Countdown managing partner and analyst Shane Hallam. Shane, there are 2 New York teams. If the season were to end, we'd be drafting 4 and 5, the Jets, and the Giants drafting 6 and 7, which is unheard of in the top 10. And then you have the Eagles having, they have 3 first-round draft picks. It's ridiculous. You can rebuild your team right now for the Jets and the Giants. You can rebuild your team in the first, your first top 10 picks. So right now on your draft board, being that the Jets are drafting 4 and 5, and the Giants drafting 6 and 7. Who do you have the Jets getting, and who do you have the Giants getting?
So I think a lot's going to depend, obviously, on
of course.
It's always about what falls to those guys. But I think if you're the Jets, there's a big opening as to what you can take there because they really have holes everywhere. You drafted your quarterback last year. So I think a guy like Neal to kind of bookend with Mekhi Becton and have just these 2 massive offensive tackles would be, I think, really interesting. And then I think, edge rusher is something that they need. George Karlaftis from Purdue just declared he's a player. Purdue doesn't usually have these big defensive players, but he's a player that's been really successful since his freshman year. 270 pounds, can play 5-tech, stand-up, 3-4 backer, complete. He can kick inside. He really plays all over the line and has had some dominant games with a defense that's pretty bad. So, I think he's a player that'd be really interesting for them. I think the Giants also kind of have those same needs, which makes it tough. If this sticks, I think the Jets could end up sniping the Giants on some of these players. But my next offensive tackle is Charles Cross from Mississippi State. The Mike Leach offense is predicated on the quick pass on passing. Cross is an excellent pass protection guy. I think the Giants, that has been one of the worst things for them this season, has been protecting Daniel Jones and trying to get that going. And so I think if they don't take him, one guy that really fits, maybe you even do go back-to-back offensive line for them, is Tyler Linderbaum, the center from Iowa, who's going to be, maybe the most athletic interior lineman, him and Creed Humphrey, who's playing outstanding, just lighting guys up, taking two guys, getting to the second level. So I think he could go, if he goes in the top 10, I think a center has not gone in the top 10 since 1968. So it would be pretty monumentous if he does.
So you mentioned you were an Ohio State fan. We actually had an Ohio State fan on the show last week too, and Garrett Price. Obviously, they took the loss to Michigan, and now Michigan is in the college football playoff. So, what do you think went wrong this year for Ohio State in those particular games, even the beginning of the season when they were struggling as a whole? And what do you think is the upside for them going forward, and also for Michigan in the playoff now? Do you think they're a legitimate threat?
So I think Michigan is a legitimate threat. I think they're going to play a close game with Georgia, especially with Alabama right in the book a little bit. I think Georgia matches up well with Michigan, unfortunately, in terms of owning the line of scrimmage. Both teams are good at that. But Michigan doesn't have those weapons like Alabama had. I think Georgia's exploitable in the secondary. So Michigan's going to have to play good defense. I think Aiden Hutchinson can have a good game. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think Michigan maybe has a shot, but it's tough. Ohio State, it is line of scrimmage. It was the big problem against Oregon. They couldn't win on either side of the ball. And then against Michigan, usually this is a team with a first-round pass rusher. They don't have that. A team with, linebacker they don't have that. The offensive line, they have two guys on the left side, top 100 picks, Nicholas Petit-Frere at the left tackle and Thayer Munford, the left guard, but that they really couldn't get it done. Hutchinson and company. So I think Ohio State's going to be one of the better teams in college football next year, obviously. But they're only going to lose, I think, 3 or 4 starters on their team. So that should, be some consistency there.
Did you adopt a bulldog?
Sorry. Yeah.
No, I'm really curious what kind of dog that is. We love dogs here.
He is a dachshund. So
my father.
There it is.
My father used to breed miniature dachshunds. Miniature dachshunds. Of course he did. Yeah, we actually had a kennel when I was a kid of 10 dachshunds, long hair and short hair dachshunds that we raised. I've been around dachshunds my whole life. So, is it a miniature or is it a long dachshund?
Long dog. I think he's 75% miniature, so he's a longer one. But he is, as they all are, stubborn as all hell. So
they can hunt. I'll tell you that. They can hunt.
They are good hunting dogs.
Yes, they are. German
good
dogs.
Barking dogs too.
Yeah, German dogs.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead.
So obviously we're talking about college players and everything like that, and we were talking about the draft, and you say you're 4 years down the road? You're in 2024 already.
Yeah. I have a three round mock of these current true freshmen.
All right, fantastic. This year specifically, because obviously we can't really get too far down the road with this. Is there a guy or a couple players that could go in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round? Because we're seeing a lot more of these later round players becoming all-star, bona fide studs. You got a few of those hidden gems scattered around in this draft?
Yeah, I think there's a handful of guys. I always look at the receiver position. I feel like that's always one where we get maybe one of those, Terry McLaurin types that gets drafted 3rd, 4th round, does well. A player that's not getting a lot of buzz that I think should is Alec Pierce, the wide receiver from Cincinnati, who has been Desmond Ritter's favorite target, 6'3", 213. I think he was verified as a 4.5. And so, he's a really good player, really physical player. I think he's one of those that kind of can come in, 3rd round pick, win a job on the outside, do really well. So he's definitely one of those players on my board that I always want to kind of tick up higher just because I think he's a good player. I think one on the defensive side of the ball that is interesting, probably not a name a lot of people know, Dominic Robinson, who's an edge rusher from Miami of Ohio, not a team that produced a lot of talent, but he's 6'4", 252, and I've just watched every game I've watched. He absolutely just dominates everyone. And so usually at the FCS level, that's good. And I'm like, okay, that's what you should do. But even, in the MAC, it's not always consistent, and he's doing it. So I think he's a player that people really should start to get on board with. If your team ends up taking him, is very worthwhile. And then one corner I'll throw out there is Jalen Watson, cornerback from Washington State, 6'3", 204, big kind of press cover man, which a lot more NFL teams are starting to get back to with some of these smaller receivers. So I think he's a pretty good player that can press, but has fluid enough hips he can kind of turn and run. So Jalen Watson, name to remember as well.